A public hearing was held today on a bill that seeks to create a review process for victims of sexual trafficking or exploitation who committed a crime as a result of that abuse. The review process under this bill would look to potentially reverse those convictions. Supporters say these convictions harm victims when trying to apply for jobs, looking for a place to live, and other opportunities. They say Maine is one of only 3 states that doesn't have some form of record relief for trafficking survivors.
This means that 47 other states and the federal government have recognized the need for this essential form of justice. We should not allow Maine to remain an outlier in denying survivors the chance to rebuild their lives without the burden of an unjust criminal record.
Any criminal record follows a person like a shadow. This is particularly tragic when the crimes are a result or, in fact, the content of their own exploitation and abuse.
While nobody testified against the bill, the Maine Judiciary Branch mentioned issues with some of the language and problems with separation of powers. Another bill discussed today looks to seal the criminal history of victims. Supporters hope both bills are passed in order to give victims a choice.